Hey everyone, it's Vanessa Callahan, and I'm so excited to welcome you to the Calm, Empowered Parent podcast. Together, let's challenge the idea that parenting has to be perfect. We know that there is no one-size-fits-all approach to raising children, and while love is the key, it sure helps to have the right tools for the job. Raising resilient humans is intensely personal and even transformative work, and I'm here for it. Let's laugh, cry, heal, and learn together. Here we go. Hi and welcome, and I'm so thrilled to welcome in an expert in her field. This is Kathryn Dunn. She's an occupational therapist with nearly 15 years of experience in the field, working with children, working with families, in school settings, and in private practice. And we're here to talk about how parents and caregivers can translate behavior so that we can understand what the needs are behind these behaviors and actually meet those needs so that we're not unfairly reacting to kids' behaviors. And it's amazing how much is actually coming through when we know how to look for the right things. And so Kathryn's going to walk us through some really important things that folks need to know in order to do that. But Kathryn, first, I always like to ask my guests, like, what got you into occupational therapy? Were you always interested in being an occupational therapist? Like, what was your journey?
Well, I was a very type A student, and I always sort of had a perfectionism and anxiety to myself. Originally, I wanted to go to law school. I had big plans for myself, but found the law school programs that I went to and visited to be a little bit too high maintenance. And I was a little anxious about how I would be in that sense. So I ran away. I ran overseas to Japan and lived there for a few years. And while I was over there, I really thought about the things that mattered to me. I mean, the things that sort of stuck with me was I have a sister who had an IEP growing up, and a lot of advocacy issues were there. And then also when I was a kid, I had big feelings, and I was a kid with big feelings with parents who had no idea what to do with the big feelings. And so I decided to go into OT. It's a program. I loved the program at University of Southern California, which is where I graduated in 2009. The program has excellent sensory integration sort of focus as well as mental health focus. And I love the ability as an OT to kind of combine the two. So yeah, and I've never looked back. It's something I love and something I love to share about and talk about. And it's exciting that in the last sort of 15 years, it's become a known profession versus something that no one really knew what I was doing when I first went into.
Well, I know the community that I polled was very excited to hear more from you. And it's part of why we actually have Kathryn as one of the coaches on our team.
I love it.
In our year-long Family Foundation Immersion program. And so we're looking forward to more and more insights from Kathryn. But I want to kind of highlight here is that oftentimes people miss how much behavior and emotion can be connected to your field of occupational therapy. And can you help us kind of understand that interrelationship, just kind of from a broad stroke, so we can see where we're heading today?
Yeah. So I think that sensory regulation has always been viewed sort of in a vacuum as sort of you have sensory issues or your body is dysregulated. But once that's corrected, sort of everything else falls in line. The thing is that and emotional regulation are really interconnected. Regulation is tied to our brain's homeostasis. It's tied to our sensory and motor neurons, which kind of run in this parallel path down the body. And they're so deeply interconnected that I think sometimes emotional regulation or dysregulation can trigger sensory dysregulation and vice versa. And I think that also
Sorry, I was going to say it's so relatable. I don't know about you, but if you're having a frustrating day, that like itchy tag on your shirt,
it's the worst.
Itches more. Or if you're having a decent time, but then there's this tag that keeps itching you, then you can actually start to feel more irritated and frustrated. So they're so handy.
It's huge. I've wore denim and jeans for years and was miserable constantly because the waistband. But I would sit in class and just kind of always be noticing my pants. And the day that I had a friend just say like, hey, what if you just like wore dresses or like overalls? And I was like life-changing, because it's true. When you're already stressed, it heightens it. And if you're already dysregulated in the body, then you can't cope with other things that come in.
That's so funny you say that because I'm definitely in the non-denim waistband.
Right.
Like only if it's like I don't know, something that doesn't have a waist or like I can adjust it entirely.
Yes.
Yeah, that's so funny.
So really you can focus on it, right? Especially if your body is moving, right? You're noticing sort of different experiences. Same with being in a hot room, right? You don't want to be in a room that's really hot and you're trying to focus, and some kids struggle with temperature regulation. I often liken it to a lot of our students are in the classroom, and if it's really loud or it's really bright and that bothers them, I always sort of think of the analogy that if you put me in a classroom and you wanted me to study or take notes, and at the same time I was covered with mosquito bites, it's not going to happen. I'm not going to be able to take those notes. I'm going to be itching and thinking about it.
And worrying about the next fight too.
Exactly,
Yeah,
thinking
absolutely.
about it. So absolutely, the body and the brain are so deeply connected.
And I think one of the insights that has been kind of coming forward, because I know that at least for myself, I got into education really to focus on direct services with children, right? Like I wanted to create an environment where they could thrive and feel intrinsically motivated and feel emotionally and socially met. And I had the opportunity to do that for many, many years directly in the classroom. And you still work with students. But I've noticed that our overlap is like my recently discovered passion for really focusing on the caregiver and the parents, because of how we can empower them to then create that environment for their children 24/7, like not just when we're around. So there's this lasting effect. But I think we were recently talking about why working one-on-one with parents, or I mean, working with parents or the family system as a whole can not only be like more effective, but also just like more satisfying for everybody.
Absolutely. I think it's equally effective. As someone who was dysregulated as a kid and really was sort of considered dramatic, right? I had big feelings, big reactions, which I now know was anxiety and not understanding my sort of what was out of my control. And I think that there are a lot of people who were raised by parents that didn't know how to process emotions, or either shamed emotions or bribed you out of emotions. I still think back to being a kid and being told to sit quietly at dinner, right? Like that's not something kids can do, but we did. We sat quietly and I
behaved
behaved. And I think being able to work with parents, as a parent now myself, I think that was a big shift for me to become a parent and realize, ooh, I know a lot about OT. I know a lot about the brain, but having my own kid brings up stuff that I had never thought about, that I had sort of thought was the norm that you did as a parent, and I know better. So to be in those moments and be dysregulated and have to say, oh, now you're dysregulated and you have to cope with your child who's flailing on the floor, screaming about how the Velveteen Rabbit had scarlet fever. God help me, I don't know why.
It's totally irrational, like tragedy or crisis, right?
And it had scarlet fever. Scarlet fever. The kid had scarlet fever, right? But there's this logical thing, and in the midst of it, I have to regulate myself. It's really hard.
And what I've seen, like in my work, and I know that this is where we overlap, and what part of you're bringing a unique perspective of having specifically worked on the OT piece. And for me, it's more like the, sort of like creating the setting and the conditions, like routines and the limits and the conflict resolution skills, and these go so hand in hand. But I think where I love bringing someone like you in is to help parents make sense of what's, even when they're trying things like, okay, we've talked about it, I've explained it, we've set up a routine. I mean, like I have an example of a client I just spoke to today, someone that you've worked with now. And they said, we spent like 3 hours last night getting up, trying to make the blanket feel right. And it's when you get to these moments that are like, they're confusing, and so you're just, kind of at a loss, or they feel really out of control, or we might say, this is really, I've heard parents say, this is really irrational, or this is really bratty, right? Because it's sort of this thing that even with the best efforts of the parents, it's still not resolving. And that's when it's good to look at things like sensorial sensitivities and things like that. So we can start to examine, is there something behind this behavior that actually we can make some sense of, that we're just maybe not aware of.
Absolutely.
So today we're going to have Kathryn walk us through a few things that she really wants parents to know, and even give you an exercise you can do with your kids or around within your family around this topic, so you can have a sense of, where you might have some blind spots. So
Yeah.
we're going to help illuminate those and light them up today. And so one of the things we talked
Mhm.
about is how, you know, the more parents can understand and empathize
Yeah.
and be there, especially when they're dysregulated, like you said, finding your own calm. Have
Mhm.
you found that parents start to, like you did, look
Mhm.
back on themselves as kids or even in the current time?
Yeah.
Like when you said, when you connected the dots, like, oh, it's a sensorial thing that
Mhm.
you don't wear denim. Like I
Yes.
hadn't actually put those two
Right.
things together before. And I was like, wait, maybe, you know what?
Yes.
Actually, yes. Like
Yes.
I only like tightness when it's
Absolutely.
distributed. I can't
Yes.
handle any pinching feeling. But I have all these people in my life who the jeans are their jam. And I'm always like, what is that?
Yes.
And you're helping
Yeah.
me understand and maybe have more empathy for kids who are also saying, ew, I don't like this.
Yeah.
These pants are yucky. And you're like, maybe it's the waist
They're
of
just
pants.
pants. Yeah, exactly. And then you're a parent who says like, it's just pants. I still remember a parent who you're talking about, her child really likes a weighted blanket and sort of wanted to always be squeezed. And she had sort of this moment where she realized, she's like, oh, I wear Spanx every day. And people laugh about it because I wear Spanx under even like
Right.
athleisure. But she's like, but now I'm realizing, and I really like that sort of pressure. And
Yes.
she's like, and it's even been an issue in my marriage because I want like these big squeezes and my husband does not want to be touched at night. And so I've had to have these like hug me pillows and all of these things. And it just kind of clicked for her that all this time I thought I was needy, right?
Oh,
or
right.
all of these other things that she had attributed, he had put behavior to it, right? I'm too needy. Or like, you know, I'm too particular, or maybe I'm too body conscious with the Spanx. But that wasn't it. She just liked the feeling of being held and compressed. So it was really freeing for her to realize that it wasn't just sort of needy behavior or something else. Yeah.
Well, it like lifts the stigma or judgment around it, and then it kind of recategorizes it from a problem to a need.
Absolutely.
And I think that's what often happens with these confusing or kind of out of control behaviors. It's like, okay, this is a problem and we need to fix it. And we could talk about the ways that we don't want to do that in a moment, but moving it into this is a need and how can we meet it?
Right.
So meeting a need versus fixing a problem.
Absolutely.
It's like a stark contrast there. So that's huge.
Yeah.
Often I see parents start to realize that they had gotten those messages as a kid and they're finding them fall, like that same message kind of falling out of their face is how I like to say it. It felt that way to me. It's like these words are just falling out of my face. It's not what I mean, really, but it's what I grew up with. And so it's hard not to repeat that unless you do something deliberately to work the other direction. And that's why you're here.
Yeah. And it's not easy. Yeah.
And why someone like Kathryn is so important, I think, to you know, rounding out this parenting empowerment work. So what is it like then, you know, like paint a picture for us, because I know you've been, and I've seen it too, but I'd like to hear from your perspective. Like, what is it like when kids don't have this kind of support, where there isn't somebody who's like an informed adult, like reframing these problems as unmet needs?
I think of it as a pendulum, right? I'm always thinking of the pendulum. The brain overall loves homeostasis. The brain loves balance. When you hear about these things, ADHD, autism, all these sort of things with the brain, it's always a hormone that's out of balance, right? The brain loves that balance of hormones. It'll do whatever it can to get back to that middle zone. And I think a lot of times what I see is parents who in those moments are afraid of a tantrum. And if you're afraid of the tantrum, you'll do anything to stop the tantrum. And if that means you bribe and give them a candy because you're just like, fine, have the candy, let's go. I want to go home. Just get the Kit Kat, make it stop. Or if that's scolding and yelling and saying like, stop acting like that, or you're acting bratty, what happens?
Often there's like an or else.
Or else you're going to lose this, or else. And sometimes just the yelling alone is enough to sort of startle a kid into silence or put them in a sort of a fearful state. And what happens is neither of those are usually consistent. Usually they're swinging along the pendulum too. There are days that you're just over it and you're frustrated and yelling. And there are other days where you're like, okay, I'll just bribe or we'll move on, right? And really what the brain loves is balance. And so what the brain is getting in those moments is not balance. It is hearing this message that sometimes when I'm dysregulated and I need my parents' support and empathy, instead of that, I get yelled at, so I get in trouble. Other times I get rewarded for it. So the brain has no idea, sort of a developing young brain doesn't know how to find that balance.
Right.
And that's really hard. And it's especially hard if you as an adult, your brain is still learning how to have that balance. I see it all the time. I honestly think we're a nation of people who weren't taught how to regulate our emotions as children. And that's the source of a lot of even viral videos, right? Somebody has a breakdown in the airport.
Like you said, reality TV.
Reality
Just
TV,
watch,
we love
we want to watch the
or
dysregulation.
yeah, or somebody's at the airport and has a breakdown and everybody wants to call them entitled or Karen. I always see that as like, oh, they just don't know how to regulate their emotions, right? Yeah. So it's not just kids, it's adults too.
Yeah.
And that's the hardest part, I think, for parents.
I think dysregulation can like amplify things that are already there. Like in the example of the carrot, it's supposed to be like, it's an amplification of entitlement, but like, or you could also have an amplification of an injustice or an amplification. So it's like sometimes emotions and dysregulation is actually like a necessary thing to like bring attention to what's happening.
Correct. Yeah.
But then I think where it gets hairy and scary between parents and kids is when both people are dysregulated, and now it's almost like no one's holding the steering wheel anymore.
Absolutely.
And then it is like it starts to swing. It's like the car can go either way. We don't know which way right now.
Yeah.
So I know that one of the things you like to do for families is like really help them understand more about this homeostasis. So can you just like tell us a little bit more? Because what I think helps, because this could be a very emotionally charged, triggering subject, by the way. And we've all, if we don't have them ourselves, we've been raised with very strong opinions of good parenting, good kids. I mean, I've asked now thousands of people in, over 100 events.
Yeah.
When you see a kid losing it in a grocery store and the parent starts to lose it, what is the immediate assumption that most people make? And almost everybody says some combination of bad parent, bad kid. And it doesn't mean that's how they would see it, but they assume like that's kind of the assumption out there, like the myth that if there's a meltdown, there's two dysregulated people, especially if it's both of them, then there must be something wrong with the kid or wrong with the parent. And it's actually just like a natural thing that's occurring. But what we need to know is like how to navigate it when these moments do arrive, and eventually over time we'll have less of them.
Yes. Absolutely.
So this is not in any way to say that dysregulation isn't something to eliminate.
No.
Because it's actually can actually be like a very reasonable response to something that's unmanageable, overwhelming, overstimulating,
all of the above.
So just to kind of put that piece in there.
Absolutely. And that's sort of how I picture it as well, is our brain is trying to find that balance. And in moments that feel anxiety ridden, or to a child that's brain is just developing, something like being told no, or not being able to get a need met right away or a want met right away, that's difficult for the young brain to understand. It's all about the next moment and the next moment. The big front of their brain is still developing. So they're really living moment to moment. Time means nothing to kids until a much older age. Being told they have to wait for something. All of these things feels to them like a crisis, and to their brain. It's not just them. Their brain is struggling to put that together. So they go into a flight or fright or freeze mode, right? And that's where we sort of have the ability as parents and as just trusted adults to co-regulate. Without co-regulation, it's pretty impossible to get those messages through to the brain. The brain functions off of sort of a mirroring process. Even earlier we were talking, you and I are just mirroring our movements, right? And in those moments of dysregulation, the best thing you can do is model regulation. It shows the brain what the balance looks like. It tells the brain, we're going to meet here in this middle. And that's sort of where those hormone levels should end up most of the time.
And I've heard studies that estimate that the difference of impact you have on what you tell a child versus what you show a child, it could be literally by powers of 10, like you could be 10 to 100 times more effective to show rather than just describe or tell. And that's because we're social learners, and we're actually not necessarily hardwired to hear something and then know how to do it.
No,
we really need to see it. And also like there's some mixed messages. Sometimes we're like, calm down, and you're like, not calm.
You're not
and
calm.
So that like, why would they trust that?
Well, how infuriating is it when you're in an argument with someone and they tell you to calm down
while they're yelling?
While they're yelling, even if it's right, they're calm, but they're not really calm. And then kids pick up on that. That's patronizing. They're not really calm. That's the worst. The co-regulation piece, modeling it and demonstrating it is the way that is most effective. And I want to acknowledge to parents who are listening and watching that it's hard. Co-regulating is really difficult. And even when there are sort of mistakes or you slip up and you dysregulate, that's a great learning opportunity to show them what you do to re-regulate. When my son has really sort of big moments, there are times that I absolutely lose my patience and just say, it's 9:30 and I need to go to bed, right? Or I'm going to lose my job if we don't get out the door right now.
Yeah, that's what's inside. You're just like starting to run that.
Oh gosh, okay. So then after I do that, I take a second. I use a few of the tools that I really like, which is scent. So I like lavender and I have like a little lavender thing that I use, or I take deep breaths and I will verbally say, you know what, I'm really frustrated and I'm sorry. I need to get back to my balance.
Yeah.
And
this is something we touch on in our longer workshops and courses.
Yeah.
We even do like a 3-day retreat just on emotional mastery. And we break down the emotion coaching steps and that, but the big takeaway that I want everyone to have is whatever it is that you hope your child will start to do for themselves, start modeling your version of it in front of them. Whether it's like giving yourself a pep talk or voicing your concerns or, like getting curious about, I wonder what I need right now, like whatever it might be, like start just like allowing your child in some insight into your process. And you'll also find that you'll become better at taking care of yourself over time because you have that level of commitment to show a child.
And that includes sensory sort of exploration. I'm very sensitive to crowds. I don't like a big crowd. I'm a little bit of an introvert. That's something that my son now knows because I've voiced it enough. I've said, hey, we're going onto Solano. We're going onto a busy street. It's a lot for mommy. So like, you're going to hold my hand and we're going to just step back. And if people are too close, mommy might want to stop off, pull off the sidewalk for a second and let people pass. And so he knows that now. We'll go to a park and he'll say, oh, this park is busy because of a birthday party. And I'll say, you're right. And mommy's going to take some deep breaths first before we go in. Because this is hard for me. And he also knows I'll never go to Chuck E. Cheese. I will never set foot in Chuck E. Cheese.
Well, I love it because it's a template for what he could say about himself. And like maybe crowds won't be his thing, but maybe a large dog could be a really upsetting thing. Say, oh, there's a large dog at the park. I'm going to see what I need around this. Like most parents have not been around hundreds of children to like kind of have all that experience and all these examples of like what is sort of within the range of behavior that might be sort of signaling something, right? And we just think like, whoa, what is this? And we do our best as parents and caregivers. When I was asking you about this, you said you really want parents to know is that things that often look like misbehavior are actually a child's attempt to reach that balance. And they're usually clues within their behavior that point towards at least something that will be close to helping them achieve that balance. I think what you were saying around this is that it's like there's almost this message coming through. Like I need help with these feelings, or I need help with my tag or whatever.
And it takes time to sort of decipher that, right? They're young children. But if you observe the things they do in the midst of a tantrum, it often can give you clues into what their body is trying to do to calm.
Okay, so let's break this down a little bit more.
Absolutely.
So if I'm observing a kid having a tantrum, can you walk me through like one or two things you might be looking for that parents often will miss because they don't know to look for it?
Absolutely. I think one of the first things I look for when I'm seeing a tantrum is what they are doing to express those emotions. If they're not verbalizing it a lot, or they are verbalizing, if they're verbalizing very loudly and they're getting like a vocal fry and they're going to lose their voice soon and you can't believe how loud they are. It is very likely that they are sensitive to sounds. And I know it feels sort of counterintuitive, but it's most often the kids who are sensitive to sounds who are also the loudest, because really what it is modulation. There's that pendulum again. Okay. Right. So now we're seeing the pendulum swing. So it might be that they need a quiet space. It might be they need some sound to block out sort of what they're like, like that white noise, pink noise, brown noise. I always tell parents to investigate them all. Some hate one noise, but they like the other sort of frequency. Or if your kid is a thrasher and they're throwing and they're pounding their fists, sometimes that's interpreted as being really bratty, right? That's the one that they're kicking at their parents or they're hitting. And that's so much judgment connected to that. So much judgment around that one. And the crying too, right? You're on an airplane and your kid's having a fit and everybody complains about it.
Inconveniencing the ears of others.
That physical sort of lashing out and thrashing and crashing I usually think that's somebody who would really like some deep squeezes, some deep pressure.
Sure.
Not in that moment, right? We're
Right.
not going to
Go
get
in there.
your space at that moment. But in a moment of calm, it's something that you could think about providing before the tantrum gets out of control.
Mhm.
When you're starting to see those signs of dysregulation, oh, maybe we need to take a break and have some quiet time.
Yeah.
Maybe we want to try our sound machine. Maybe we need some hugs and squeezes. Like, let's do some arm squeezes. And
Mhm.
over time, I have a 3.5-year-old with huge feelings. I'm basically just re-raising myself, but with different strategies. And so hopefully it goes well. And he recently at 3.5 was able to see, I need help with my feelings in the middle of a tantrum. And that was the first time, right? Before that, it's always been like, no, 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 I want it now. And he really was able to say, I don't feel good. I need help with my feelings. So that's his brain showing me, oh, all these times I've been sitting here patiently and quietly waiting for his tantrums to co-regulate. It's working, right? His brain's learning, oh, actually, she can help me sort of feel better.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And I think when they identify you, I think of it as like, oh, you're a trusted thought partner.
Yeah.
And that's really different than going on the pendulum with them.
Mm-hmm.
And what I've seen is like it can be incredibly satisfying when parents start to feel effective at guiding children towards the soothing behaviors, the soothing movements, and the soothing stimulations that actually help them to regulate. And then if they're not able to find it for their kid, they do it for themselves in that moment, in that co-regulation. And it feels so much better to have put the effort there rather than in either trying to shut it down or shutting down yourself, giving in, and then knowing you have a bigger battle later. And that's not to say that we're not going to make mistakes.
No,
like we're gonna. The pendulum will swing no matter what,
absolutely.
but it's about having less of them and maybe swinging less wildly. And then over time, and you'll see them. You'll see these like child whispers in preschools and elementary schools, coaches, where they've done this enough that they're like, okay, we're pretty much kind of stay here most days. And it just takes the repetition, it takes the practice and the relearning, but it's totally possible. And that's a very hopeful thing.
It is, it's very hopeful. And I always remind myself that when the brain is looking for that balance, that the brain loves structure. Brain loves consistency. So the more you do it, mistakes are going to happen, but just remind yourself that the next time you do it, that's just adding another tally mark. Because often what I see is, I think that gentle parenting is sort of this trendy term. And I love gentle parenting, but I worry sometimes that now there's become sort of too permissive parenting and you're pulling back all expectations. And that's the same fearful response to a tantrum or a fear of demands. You can't be afraid of tantrums, and it's hard. But that's that pendulum swing too. If you overly punish the behaviors, quote unquote behaviors, or if you overly excuse them, you're going to end up with that swing no matter what. And the swing will go both directions.
And let's talk, since the trend is towards the gentle parenting. And I think it's often because we're like parents are of a generation that maybe experience the opposite of that. And what we see is a pendulum swing even generationally. But then within ourselves, we also swing because we have the model we grew up with, the model we're trying, the model we grew up with, the model we're trying. It's like, so, you know, and in my work, we always talk about what is possible in terms of like leaving a legacy of love, leaving a legacy of empowerment. And what does that mean in your own family? And it's going to be different for each family. Not everybody did grow up with a permissive or authoritarian parent. Sometimes people grow up with one of each. I mean, there's all these different ways we are kind of informed. But I think to your point, it doesn't mean that we pull back and reduce all the expectations and demands because we're taking on a perspective of maybe this behavior is telling us something. Maybe this behavior is telling us something does not mean, so we're going to let it ride and we're going to let them hit us and we're going to just sit there, or, you know, there's this balance that they need from us. And I like to describe it as like the perfect blend between like support and demand and how we can even be like, here's my supportive statement and here's my demand and here's my supportive statement, here's my demand. But I'm curious, like, if you could walk us through what that looks like. But, and I also just want to fully acknowledge that a lot of us really, truly did not have this modeled for us. So we are charting new territory on something that's incredibly important and incredibly sensitive.
It really is.
And so like all the emotions should come up if you're doing this right, actually, because it's not easy work.
And it brings it up. It brings up those triggers from sort of the past. I have a very clear memory of being surprised at a birthday party when I was 4 and 5. It was a surprise party. that was not the right thing for me. I was an anxious child, a little
Oh
introverted.
man, yeah.
And I remember coming out of the
pushing
corner,
past the
well
threshold.
past.
Yeah.
Everybody was cheering and yelling, and I broke down. I had a meltdown.
Oh, you poor
I
thing.
was so overwhelmed. And to this day, I remember my dad punishing me, getting really mad. Like, all these people came here for you.
Oh, the guilt.
The guilt. They came to this party, like, act right, go to your
Sure.
room. And, you know, at that moment, I remember thinking like I was a failure, right? Like,
Well,
I
there's
didn't
this message.
appreciate it. Yes,
It's like, don't be you.
don't be you. Don't be dramatic. There was a family nickname for me, DQ, drama queen. And I remember thinking, am I dramatic or am I just like sad?
Yeah.
And I think that those messages were very prevalent. I don't think that it was common to give kids space to have feelings.
Yeah.
And so it is really hard. You are really working against sort of.
Well, it was considered spoiling.
It was.
So we're not trying, but we're also being careful. We're not trying to push people towards what would be truly
Right.
spoiling or being overly permissive.
Yep.
And what we mean by overly permissive is that the authority is too far over onto the kid's side, but it's inappropriate because they have limited life experience. And especially when they're dysregulated, they're not going to be able to even access what they need to be able to make good decisions anyway. And so we do need to sort of be like the calm, sane, well experienced presence there, you know, well balanced and more homeostasis. So walk us through what it can look like. You know, you had this example, for example, with your son and chocolate. I know.
Love chocolate.
Yeah.
My son recently has discovered Halloween and Advent calendars and how fabulous that is. But we have a thing where dinner is served and he gets what he gets, right? And then there's always a chocolate with the plate. So I've worked really hard not to set up this idea of like you eat your dinner first and then you can get a chocolate, because I think that can lead to some pendulum swings when it comes to eating. Yep, and power struggles. But lately he's just, you know, he's realizing he could get extra chocolate because of the Advent calendar and we're having chocolate.
So now he's trying to game extra chocolate.
Now he wants
extra chocolate
at the end of every day. Where's my calendar? He asked today. So where's my new calendar? Well, that was a December thing. And he is testing those boundaries. He's kicking, he's, you know, throws his fist on the ground and says, I want it now, I want it now. And I've had to be able to co-regulate, take him to the bedroom, which is his safe space. So I always encourage parents to identify a space in the home that if they're going to have big physical sort of reactions, they can do it safely. And that includes they don't get to hit you. They don't get to hit anyone else in the house. And that includes pets. That includes other children. And he hits that door, wants to get out, let me out. And in those moments, I want every parent to remember also to limit language. It's not getting in, right? When you are in a big moment of dysregulation, the upstairs sort of frontal part of your brain that controls logic is not communicating in any way to the lower part.
When you make like a single request and you kind of are clear about it, and then I like to reflect back what I see. Like, oh, I see that you're not quite ready to make a choice here or whatever it might be. And when you are ready, this is what happens. And that's it.
Yeah, that's it.
Like, let's leave like a dramatic pause. Because what we can do is we think we need a continual like rollout of language and conversation in order to stay in control of the situation. And nothing could be further from the truth.
Nothing could be further from the truth. I, in those instances, will just say, we only have one chocolate each day. You had your chocolate today. I know you're mad. And then he's got these things going on, right? He's kind of thrashing and yelling. And if he starts to come at me, I'll say, oh, you can't hit mommy, right? You can't hit. That's not a choice. You can't hit somebody. You have this space. And I repeat that occasionally when it needs to be done.
And you leave space in between for him to
have those feelings.
And also like sort out like, is he going, like sometimes the kids have these moments where they're like, maybe they are going to pull it together, but then you just you're keeping
and you're
stuck
aching
in there.
it.
And so a lot of times I give a little space. I'll be right over here when you're ready, reading a book. You're welcome to join me, you know, just
exactly. I love to read a book while he's sitting there. And it's true. Think about yourself. If you were the person at the airport and you've missed 2 flights and you haven't slept in 24 hours and you're hot and you need a shower, and then the customer service agent keeps talking to you when you're saying like, I need space or I need to, right? It dysregulates one.
Yeah.
The language isn't getting through, and that's more frustrating.
Yeah.
And
I would say
that's,
try it once, maybe twice. And if it's not getting through, let it
let it go
let it
for
go.
that moment. Yeah.
Mhm.
And in the moments after the tantrum or later that night or day, you can revisit it.
Right.
You can talk about, oh, you had really big feelings earlier. And also, I think maintaining sort of the flat affect is really important. I also think that if it's something that's really upsetting, it's okay to meet them where they're at and show a little bit of that, like, oh, you're so frustrated. I know you're frustrated.
Yeah.
Sometimes I think it can feel patronizing when we keep too flat of an affect. And I think it's okay to say, like, yeah, you were in the middle of that episode and we couldn't finish it. That is hard, right? And that's that empathy piece, telling their brain, I get it.
I think it can be like calm, empathetic, and even empowering. And sometimes I even bring in a little flavor of like, when this is all over, we'll have a chance to blank, you know, or
absolutely.
like, oh, you know, just letting them know there's something after this. This is temporary.
Yeah.
So there's nice little pieces we're kind of putting together here. Again, more thorough training on this in our programs, but gives you a little piece of it. And I'm so glad. Thank you for walking us through that.
Of course.
And, you know, and then we have that opportunity to model a strategy or two, like a deep breath, or you know, just try to come back to center yourself or stay in center.
Yeah, and that's part of what we talk about as well in the trainings is sort of the sensory toolbox that I think every family should have at home. We can get in depth in sort of what that looks like.
Yeah.
And that's where the family dynamic piece kind of builds as well. What does each family need to get their needs met?
Yeah, because like what we like to do is we like to put like the most universal tools into families' toolboxes. I mean, that's our kind of our first move. But then what we like to do is find out about each family member's needs and tendencies, and we actually have them do the step that's really important to help us personalize their tool set for them and with them. And this is where Kathryn really shines. And I've seen what an impact this has had on families. Really like, wow, you know, we took the general advice, we applied that got us about 30 to 60% there. But this last piece help us. And this is what she's going to share with us today as sort of where most families should start. And I would say, like, you know, if you even just pause right here and re-listen to the first part of what we talked about, that's actually the real foundation. But when I'm talking about starting to investigate what each family's unique sensory and needs profile is, so that you can start to bring in tools that meet each of their needs uniquely, because it's not going to be the same thing for every kid or every adult. Let's acknowledge that first of all. Like, what works for you may not work for your kid. Just like your client who's like, I love the Spanx, I love the squeezes, and the husband's like, don't touch me. And it's like, wow, okay, so we are diverse, we're unique, we have differences here, and we can build off of those.
Yeah, and the first step is building an inventory. It's noticing.
I love a good inventory.
Yes, we do. I'm a Virgo, so I love that.
It's my scientist side. I'm like, well, we don't know what we don't know until we actually observe and find out, right?
And I think that a lot of times when we think of sensory, the big ones stand out, right? There's vision. Like, of course, people don't love a fluorescent light usually, or loud sounds. Oh yeah, when a siren goes by, it does bother me and I have to block my ears. But there are these sort of other senses that people forget about. Vestibular, which we'll get into, is sort of a technical term, but it's that sense of movement, right? Your inner ear really has a lot to do with movement and balance and how you feel in your body. That's sometimes where you see kids who like to spin or like to rock. And we have to remind ourselves that as humans, we were all in a uterus at one point, and the uterus was dark and had regular movement, repetitive sort of rhythmic movement, and was kind of compressed, right? You were really squished in there. My 11-pound baby was especially squished. And so our bodies often tend to want those movements that kind of mimic that early development when we were really regulated. When you're in the womb, you're very well regulated, and you're co-regulated with your sort of host body. We forget about sort of the deep senses that our body likes. When you have come out of a massage, it feels wonderful, not just because you're getting knots out, but because you're getting some really good input to sort of the deeper neurons, right? And then there's a sense that people forget about, where it's checking in with your own body, the ability to know, oh, I need to go to the bathroom. Ooh, I need these things. I'm thirsty, I'm hungry. All of these are senses, and we forget about them. We think about just like, oh, but it's quiet in here.
Like we think of hearing and vision, and
taste
maybe and maybe smell.
Smell, but we forget. So when you're doing an inventory, I really encourage you to look at all different senses And that includes
such a smart
thinking,
move.
when does your body feel bad? And when does your body feel good? You can usually think of the top 3 for each pretty quickly. Like the
Yes.
chalkboard,
No,
nails on the
that's really
chalkboard.
true.
Yeah.
Yeah, like feeling good, massage, warm bath or
Oh,
shower.
love it.
Right. And
Yep.
then like loose clothing, like
Yep.
kind of like a cuddly kind of
Mhm.
feeling, or like and like moving in
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
having that
And other people, it's
unrestricted
tucked
feeling.
in, right? Other people,
Yeah.
like, if I'm in bed, I want to be tucked all the way in,
Tucked
and
in,
I don't
yeah.
want anything touching it. Or it's heat, right? I like being. My husband loves to sleep in a cold room under blankets. Nothing feels more regulating to him, and so he'll voice that.
Yeah.
And then similarly, there are visceral reactions to
Yeah.
things that you cannot stand.
Right.
Right? For me,
Like
it's
you
that
were mentioning nails on the chalkboard.
certain sounds
Yeah.
or certain tastes. To me, I get really easily sort of car sick. So being on a swing or something like that, immediately I feel sick. I cannot be on a swing.
Right. So what I'm hearing
Mhm.
is that in terms of stimulation to the senses, we're
Yeah.
like going to want to for each family member, but
Yeah.
especially for your child or children,
Yeah.
kind of note like things that you and your child can't stand,
Can't stand.
and things that they can't do without. It's like
Mhm.
so they're like it's so much they should, it's like could be connected to a basic need almost.
Absolutely.
And so can we talk about clothes?
Yes, clothes is a big one.
Yeah, 'cause we brought it up already.
We've
The
mentioned it,
denim
yeah.
and the Spanx so far, but there's more. And so
Yes.
this is one that is so common with parents and kids that I think it's really worth like give us like 4 or 5 ways
Yeah.
that kids are sensitive to clothes,
Absolutely.
and
Yeah.
then you all will have a specific thing you can go and
check on.
inventory and
Yeah.
check on. Yeah.
Yeah, clothes are huge. We wear them all day throughout the day. It's a social expectation. We can't not wear clothes.
Yeah.
Tags are sort of the obvious one. The temperature is huge. I have a lot of kids who just want to wear shorts and t-shirts in the middle of winter. It's okay. Right? Unless you're somewhere where it's really freezing and you need to wear a parka or you'll have some sort of hypothermia.
Yeah.
If your kid is telling you that they want to wear shorts and it's 50 degrees out, it's okay. You're not a bad parent.
Yeah.
They know their body. Another one is sort of the textures of fabrics. Corduroy, so many of my kids cannot go near corduroy, denim. I encourage you to go to the store, to go to a fabric store. Have your
Oh,
kids feel
yeah.
different fabrics. They'll tell you really quickly which ones they like and which ones they don't. Sometimes that can be seams on socks.
Seams,
Seams
yeah.
are huge.
Like seams are kind of in the tag category. It's sort of
Mhm.
like fabric gone wrong.
Yep.
For some people.
Yeah. And they
Oh, no,
really
what did
notice
you
it.
do to it?
The
Yeah.
entire day they're sitting in class thinking about the seam of their sock. And that can also be scents, fabric softener. I know you said that you're really sensitive.
I dislike anything that doesn't like isn't 100% natural scent wise.
Yeah.
And it can really be so distracting that and dysregulating for me that I will rewash something until the scent is gone in just plain water just to get rid of it, like
Have
get
any
it out of
scent.
my life.
Wow.
But I'm not necessarily like if I'm around, I'm not so scent sensitive that I can't be around other people wearing scents.
Yeah.
Just that I can't have a consistent like wafting of that.
And
that
some
smell.
are so
Too
sensitive they
distracting.
can't be next to them, right? I
Yes,
have kids who have to
exactly.
leave the room if someone's wearing perfume.
That's right.
And colors, some kids really just don't want a bright color palette. Some want that bright color palette. It stimulates, it arouses, it sort of gets them sort of alert. All of these things, clothing can go wrong in so many ways. So choose your power battles. I know we talk about that a lot, and choose those battles. Clothing is not the one. If you can find clothing that works.
I love it's like a low hanging one.
It is a low hanging fruit. And
Yeah.
the things that need to happen, they have to be clean, right? You have to change your underwear every day. That's something I tell parents. They can't get away with that. Like if there's one pair of underwear that they really like, you're going to have to find a match. And if you can't find the perfect match, you need to work with them on desensitizing to a pair that's as soft or close to soft.
Yeah, as close as you can get to it.
Because that's one thing I've heard is kids will wear them until there's holes in them. I get it, but you've got to have right? Your hygiene has to be good. You can't have infections.
Right.
And if it's the same pair of pants that you're rewashing, fine, but then you have to help me wash them if that's really a thing. Because similarly,
this is bringing that structure
regulated
structure
back in, right?
Yeah.
You can have preferences, but you also can't be unsafe, right?
Yeah, unsafe or like sort of we have to still have within range a reasonable response to the demand. So if they're like demanding, I will only wear in rigidity, right? Like I will only wear these socks because they're the only ones that feel good. You're gonna need to kind of step into what is it about these socks that are that are making them the best, and what makes these other ones so bad, like, and then kind of show that optimism again. I was talking about like I'll bet that these are not the only pair of socks on the entire
Yeah.
planet that,
Yeah.
because if these exist,
Yep.
there must be others.
Yeah.
Why don't we look into that?
Go to the store, go to
Yeah.
the fabric store, and then you're giving them autonomy too. They get to
Right.
pick, oh, this is the one I like.
Yeah.
Or these are the socks I like it, but this fabric softener, that makes them feel soft.
Yeah. And then, but they're like,
Yep.
well, then I will only wear these. And it's like,
Mhm.
well,
No.
we can
Yeah.
make sure that, you know, these are available most days, but occasionally
You need to have plan Bs.
you'll have to have a backup.
Yeah.
These are great tips. I love it. One last area that
Yeah.
I would love for folks to think, you know, to be paying attention to is when there are those big upsets.
Yeah.
And so can you walk us through maybe one or two things to look out for? I mean, you mentioned earlier something, the yelling.
Yes.
So there's that. So maybe
Mhm.
the sensitivity to sound could be something that you could be
Sound to
looking
look
out for.
for.
And then there's something about the hitting, the deep
Yes,
pressure.
deep
But
pressure.
there's one I think that
Mhm.
stood out to me, you mentioned
Yeah.
before, which is like, how about the kids? Like, okay, so here's an example.
Yeah.
I have a child in my life who, like, I love and adore, and she used to just run laps around my house like
Yes.
this for
Yes.
sometimes like 30 to 45 minutes as part of her like zoomies for the night.
Yeah.
But there was, and I always thought, oh, she's getting her energy out. But when I look back on it,
Yeah. Yes.
and
It's that pressure.
so talk us through, like, what are
Yeah.
kids doing when they're behaving this way? Like,
The zoomies, I love it. When I see kids zoomies, I immediately think they want input, but they don't know how to get it in consolidated amounts.
yeah.
So running it's an activity that involves all those senses of the inner ear, and you're moving and you're pounding the pavement, right? They call it pounding the pavement for a reason.
Yeah.
That is constant pressure being applied to sort of the joints.
And it's like rhythmic too.
Rhythmic, constant pressure. And that's the same sort of feeling as getting your joints kind of pulled and compressed. So those sort of joint pulls can feel really nice for those kids. Also, if you can encourage as much as possible a heavy routine instead.
Okay.
So
like shorter,
like
really
but
getting
with
those.
intensity. I want slow jump squats. I want slow movements with lots of weight. They're holding something heavy. They're carrying the laundry to the washing machine. We call it heavy work.
Yeah.
Because that's going to get more bang for your buck. You're going to get that sort of wearing them out or getting their energy out in 10 minutes instead of 45 minutes. And usually what happens is that actually increases their arousal because they're getting some of what they need, but they're not getting all of it. So they're seeking more.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. I think you just saved so many people's like evening routines, like shaved off minutes, if not, you know, more.
Use the movements to motivate, right? We've talked about that before. I play Mother May I every night with my son, and he gets to ask, Mother May I jump 10 times to get to my toothbrush? Yes, we stand on one foot. So many ways to build in movement and not have it be this reckless zoomie that we hope is working, but usually is not. Usually
that brings to mind one thing we started implementing were timed dance parties. So 15 minutes instead of 45. 15 minutes, and we would really like, and we would do like moves, you know, like going high and low, like these slow squats. Yeah, rhythmically to the music. Like that.
You were doing like a step class or something.
So we actually did a step out, and we were always happy we did it every time.
Absolutely, and it feels good for you too.
Oh, and then we ended with piling on the couch, where she was on the bottom, and we all compressed.
Piled on top. Pillow presses, one of my favorite things in the world.
She'll actually pillow on top.
Oh, good. All right.
Becoming like, you know,
more
connected to what she needs.
Yeah.
So we do need to wrap up.
Okay.
It's so hard because Kathryn and I, oh my gosh.
I know we could talk for hours.
Yeah, which is why you're one of the coaches in my program, because people can't get enough of you. But I like to ask all my guests, if there's one thing that you could whisper to every parent on this topic, like just whisper in their ear and help them feel more calm and empowered, what would that be?
Remembering that the brain loves balance, right? The brain loves structure, the brain loves balance. And those moments when your child is doing something that feels like an awful behavior, it is the brain trying to find a balance. Something is dysregulated, and the brain will swing back and forth to find that middle zone. And so if you can focus on co-regulating before communicating or before having any other demands, you're going to see so many more right sort of responses and benefits in quicker amount of time, and the pendulum will stop swinging as far. There's always going to be those moments, but if we can have that pendulum swing sort of just in a moderate range versus those big swings, the brain loves it. The brain doesn't want to be dysregulated. It doesn't feel good to the brain. And in those moments, your kid's not feeling great, right? They're not being bratty, and they're not trying to get something out of it. In the moments, though, that upstairs logic brain is not working.
I just love, Kathryn, how you help us translate behavior from problems into insights. It's a huge gift. I just want to thank you for coming on and sharing
so happy to be
your
here
insights with everybody.
Yay. So glad to be here.
And much more from Kathryn. So just some final thoughts. The more consistency and balance you can bring into your family, the less the pendulum will swing. And there's so much hopefulness in that. And you don't have to do it alone. There are people like Kathryn, like myself, who are more than happy to help you with your inventory, make sense of it, and put together a meaningful toolbox and kind of emotion coaching plan forward, and how to help with the confusing parts, the parts that are hard, the parts that feel out of control. And we love this work, so please be in touch if it's something you'd like to have more support with.
Please do. Outsourcing is huge, and having that shared thought that you were talking about even earlier with our kids, the same thing, having a thought partner makes a huge difference.
I think it's such an unfair expectation that we're supposed to learn on the job when it comes to something so important and so complex as raising humans. So, good job being here today. So glad you got to have your calm, empowered parent bucket filled up. And until next time.
All right, great. Thanks so much.
As we wrap up, remember, there's no one-size-fits-all way to parent. Keep nurturing those strong family bonds and watch resilience bloom in your community. You've got this. And if you found this episode valuable, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. You can also hop over to thecalmempoweredparent.com for current events and to grab your copy of the Calm Parent Strategy Guide. You can even learn how to bring our free and low-cost workshops to your school or community. Your support means the world to us and helps us empower more parents and children. Let's do this together.